Have you ever wondered if a single night, a single decision, could change not just someone's future, but the way the world saw them? This isn't a fairy tale, and it's not about some hero in a cape. It's about a boy with nothing to his name, who one cold night found himself carrying the weight of a stranger's world on his back. Literally. Malik Turner had mastered the art of being invisible. At 16, the streets of the city had been his only home for over a year, and in a place where everyone's eyes were glued to glowing phone screens or glued to the ground, disappearing wasn't difficult. Downtown pulsed with noise and neon, the sizzle of food trucks, the hum of traffic, the laughter of tourists spilling out of bars. But Malik stayed on the fringes, moving through alleys and back streets, living on whatever scraps the day's indifference left behind. That evening, the air was cold enough to bite, the sky heavy with a storm that hadn't yet broken. He wore layers of mismatched clothing, a hoodie 2 sizes too big with frayed cuffs, jeans stiff from repeated wear, sneakers that had long since surrendered their soles. Everything he owned fit into a single, battered backpack, a cracked water bottle, a few napkins folded neatly like they were treasure, and a worn photograph of his mother, the edges curled from time. He'd been heading toward the alley behind a Vietnamese bakery, a familiar route. The owner there always tossed out unsold bread just before closing, and Malik knew how to pick through the pile before the rats or the weather ruined it. Tonight, luck seemed on his side. A loaf of white bread, still in its plastic, just a little damp on one edge. In his world, that was a feast. But then he heard it. At first it was so soft he thought it might have been the wind. Tiny, uneven hiccups, like someone trying not to cry. Malik froze, his instincts split between curiosity and the survival habit of avoiding anything unexpected. But something about the sound pulled him closer, guiding him toward a stack of flattened cardboard boxes by the back fence. There in the shadows sat a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her dress, once pink, was streaked with dirt, her hair matted into tangled curls. Scratches marked her arms and knees, and her eyes. They stared straight ahead, unfocused, as if they weren't really looking at anything. Malik spoke softly, careful not to spook her. "Hey," he murmured. Her head turned toward the sound of his voice, but her gaze didn't meet his. That's when it hit him. She wasn't just lost. She was blind. "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers," she said, her voice tiny and shaking. Malik crouched so he wasn't towering over her. "Fair enough," he said gently. "But I'm Malik, and right now I'm just a guy holding a loaf of bread who's worried you're freezing out here." When she didn't answer, he glanced at her bare feet, scraped, swollen, and pink from the cold. Something clenched tight in his chest. Without another word, he dug into his backpack, pulling out a wrapped turkey sandwich he'd been saving. It was the only real food he had, still slightly warm from a church volunteer who'd given it to him earlier. He held it out, and she took it slowly, hands trembling. She didn't wolf it down. She just held it in her mouth for a moment, like she wasn't sure it was real. Watching her eat cracked something deep in him. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Ava." "That's a nice name," Malik replied. "Do you live around here?" She shook her head. I I don't know where I am." They sat in silence for a while, the city noise bleeding in from far away, the echo of sirens, the slam of a car door, the faint bass from a passing car. People were out there, rushing through their own worlds, but in this alley, it was just them, and it was painfully clear she had nowhere to go. When she began to shiver, Malik said, "My place isn't far." "Not much, but it's dry. You don't have to come, but I'll stay here with you if you want." There was a pause, then she nodded. He helped her stand, guiding her small hand into his. They walked together, weaving through side streets and slipping past dumpsters. Malik's home was a makeshift lean-to behind a gas station, plywood, tarps, and duct tape, forming a fragile shelter against the elements. Inside there was a milk crate, a blanket, and a small battery lantern. He sat her down, wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, and turned on the light. Outside, the world was loud and uncaring. Inside, for the first time in months, Malik didn't feel completely alone. That night, the rain came, soft at first, then steady. Ava curled up under the blanket, clutching the fabric like it might vanish. Malik placed his hoodie over her feet, ignoring the chill that seeped into his own skin. "You still there?" she whispered once, voice almost drowned by the rain. "I'm here," he said, "not leaving you out here." Her breathing slowed. She fell asleep. Malik leaned back against the cinder block wall, listening to the storm. And as the night stretched on, he realized something. This wasn't just about keeping someone else safe. It was about proving, maybe for the first time, that he could be more than a shadow. He didn't know that by morning, this little girl, this stranger, would change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. And honestly, as someone who's seen how fast people walk past each other in the real world, I couldn't help thinking, sometimes the people with the least to give are the ones who give everything. The morning after the rain, Malik woke stiff and sore, his back pressed against the cold wall of his shelter. The tarp above him rattled in the breeze, letting in thin slivers of pale gray daylight. He glanced at Ava, still asleep. Her small face softened under the folds of the blanket, her body curled in a way that made her seem even younger. Malik knew they couldn't stay here for long. By mid-morning, the mechanic shop nearby would roar to life, and someone might notice her. If they did, questions would follow, questions he wasn't ready to answer. He tapped her shoulder gently. "Ava," he said softly. "Hey, it's morning." Her eyes fluttered open, though they didn't focus on anything. "Are we still here?" she whispered. "Yeah," he replied, "but I think we should get out for a bit. Maybe find something to eat." She sat up slowly, rubbing her arms. Malik handed her his hoodie from the night before. It was still damp, but she slipped it on without complaint. Together they stepped out into the alley. The ground was slick, puddles reflecting fragments of the cloudy sky. Malik held her hand, guiding her around shards of glass and uneven concrete. When her bare foot caught on a sharp edge, she winced. Malik crouched immediately. "You want me to carry you?" he asked. "Will it hurt your back?" she replied, hesitant. He shook his head. "I'm good. Just hop on." She climbed onto his back, arms tightening around his neck. Malik rose, adjusting her weight. She was light, too light, and he knew what that meant. Days of not eating enough. He kept to the side streets, avoiding main roads where police and security were more common. The city was a map burned into his mind. He knew where the cameras were, which alleys connected, and which shopkeepers turned a blind eye. Eventually, they passed a strip of small shops, the kind with faded awnings and dusty window displays. One storefront, a phone repair shop, had its door propped open. A few teens stood inside, laughing at something on a TV mounted to the wall. Malik stepped closer, Ava still on his back. One of the boys looked up. "Yo, who's that on your back?" he asked, more curious than hostile. "A friend," Malik replied simply. "We're just looking for something." Then the TV caught his eye. The local news was playing, the anchor's voice muffled under gospel music coming from the barbershop next door. The image on screen made him freeze. A photo of a little girl in a pink dress, smiling. It was Ava. The caption read, "Missing since Tuesday. Last seen at West End Park. Authorities urge anyone with information to call immediately." Malik's chest tightened. The reporter mentioned she had wandered away from her caretaker. That was nearly 10 miles from here. How had she made it that far? Blind, alone, in a city that didn't notice. "Wait," one of the teens said, pointing at the screen. "Is that? Yo, that's her, right?" The shopkeeper, now looking up, asked, "That your sister?" Ava clung tighter to Malik's shoulders. "Yeah," he said quickly, backing toward the door. "That's her." The boy inside muttered something about a reward, but Malik didn't wait to hear more. He stepped out and turned down a side street, moving fast until they were alone again. Only then did he set Ava down. "Was that me?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," Malik said. "They're looking for you." "I don't want to go with the police," she whispered. "You won't," Malik promised. "We're going to find your real home. Your family." She nodded, though her lips trembled. Malik's mind was already turning. He didn't catch the full address from the news clip, but he'd seen a landmark. A red brick wall, a tall iron gate. If he could get to West End, he might find it. The problem was distance. It was miles away, and no bus driver would let a soaked, ragged teen carrying a barefoot girl on board. without questions. That meant one option: walking. He adjusted the straps of his backpack, made sure Ava's arms were secure around his neck, and started moving. The drizzle began before they left the old district, but Malik had already felt it coming. People moved faster, eyes flicking toward the clouds. Umbrellas opened in cautious hands. By the time they crossed under the freeway, the drizzle had turned to a steady rain. Malik shifted Ava's weight on his back. He'd found a torn piece of plastic earlier and wrapped it around her like a makeshift poncho. It did little for him. His hoodie was soon soaked through, his jeans heavy with water. But at least she was shielded. The streets shifted as they walked. Industrial blocks with boarded-up windows gave way to strip malls and tired convenience stores. They passed a school playground, empty except for a single swing swaying in the wind. At a gas station, Malik stopped under the awning to rest. His shoulders burned from carrying her, his legs ached, and his fingers had gone numb. Ava stirred. "Are we there yet?" she asked, voice soft. "Not yet," he said. "Soon." She didn't complain, just rested her head again. By the 6th mile, the rain was relentless. Malik's shoes squelched with each step, the right one split open at the toe. Every few blocks, he'd tap Ava's knee to check if she was okay. She'd nod each time, even when he could feel her shivering. The cold was beginning to settle deep into his back, but he kept moving. When they finally left the rougher part of town, the streets widened. Lawns appeared, trimmed, neat, no broken glass, no graffiti. The houses here looked like they belonged in another world. "Almost there," Malik whispered, though he wasn't entirely sure. Then at the crest of a hill, he saw it. The tall iron gate from the news clip, flanked by 2 brick pillars. Beyond it, a long driveway curled toward a 3-story home, glowing with warm yellow light. Malik stepped to the call box and pressed the button. A voice crackled through. "Yes?" He swallowed. I found her. I found Ava." There was a pause, then the gate began to swing open. The front door opened before they reached the steps. A tall man in a gray suit rushed forward, followed by a woman in a housecoat with tears streaming down her face. Behind them, a uniformed staff member stood frozen. "Daddy!" Ava cried, sliding off Malik's back and stumbling toward the man. He dropped to his knees and caught her in his arms, holding her so tightly it looked like he might never let go. Malik stepped back, water dripping off his face, his hoodie clinging to his skin. "She's safe now," he said quietly. And before anyone could ask his name, before they could stop him, he turned and started back down the driveway. The rain swallowed him up again, the sound of the gates closing, fading behind him. Malik walked away from the mansion without looking back. The rain poured harder now, each drop cold enough to sting, but he barely noticed. His shoes squelched with every step, his hoodie clung to his skin, and his legs felt like lead. Still, something inside him was lighter than it had been in a long time. He had done what he came to do. She was home, safe, warm. That was enough, or at least that's what he told himself as the glow of the mansion's windows faded behind him. He didn't stop until he reached a bus stop several blocks away. It had no bench, just a cracked plexiglass wall and a strip of damp concrete. Malik sat down, knees pulled to his chest, shivering as the cold air cut through his soaked clothes. The plastic sheet he'd wrapped around Ava was gone. He thought about heading back downtown, maybe finding something behind the convenience store or the church that sometimes left bags of food by its back door. His life was waiting for him exactly where he had left it, on the edges of the city, invisible again. What Malik didn't know was that the questions had already started inside the mansion he had just left. Ava had been wrapped in thick blankets, her temperature checked, the scratches and bruises on her small body carefully documented. Her mother, Julia Carrill, sat beside her, brushing her tangled curls with trembling fingers, whispering, "Thank you," over and over, though Ava didn't seem to fully understand who the words were meant for. Nathan Carrill, the man in the gray suit, stood in the hallway outside her room, speaking into his phone in a low, urgent voice. "No, we don't know his name. He left before we could stop him. 16, maybe 17. Thin, black hoodie, carried her on his back through the storm. Find him." Within hours, security footage from the front gate had been pulled. The grainy image of a teenage boy in the rain, gently setting down a little girl before walking away, began to circulate online. Someone posted it with the caption, "Unknown teen walks 10 miles in the rain to return blind girl to her family, then disappears." By sunrise, it had been shared tens of thousands of times. Malik had no idea. He had returned to the city before dawn and collapsed behind the convenience store, using a piece of cardboard as a mat. When he woke, the sky was still gray, and the streets were quiet except for the distant rumble of a garbage truck. He was rubbing the sleep from his eyes when a shadow fell across him. A voice spoke, steady, deep, and unfamiliar. "You walked 10 miles in the rain to bring my daughter home." Malik froze. Looking up, he saw a tall man in a dark overcoat standing in front of him. His heart skipped. It was the man from the mansion, Nathan Carelli. Malik sat up slowly, pulling his hoodie tighter around his shoulders. "I'm not stealing anything," he muttered. "I know," Nathan said, taking a step closer before crouching to meet Malik's eyes. "She told me everything she could. Your voice, the sandwich you gave her, how you never left her side." His tone was calm, but there was something in his gaze Malik wasn't used to. Respect. Malik looked down at the wet concrete. "I wasn't looking for thanks." Nathan nodded. "I know that too." He reached into his coat and pulled out a metal thermos, unscrewing the lid before handing it over. "It's hot tea. You look like you need it." Malik hesitated, then took it, the steam warming his cold fingers. He sipped carefully, the heat almost burning his mouth, but it was a good kind of pain. Nathan sat down beside him without saying anything else, letting the sound of early morning traffic and the distant chirp of birds fill the silence. After a moment, Nathan spoke again. "Ava's been through a lot. She's going to need time to feel safe again, but she's okay now because of you." Malik shifted uncomfortably. "I was just trying to help." "And that's exactly why I'm here," Nathan said. "Because someone like you, someone who would carry a stranger's child across the city in the rain and give her the only real food he had, doesn't belong sleeping on the ground behind a store. You belong somewhere people see you, somewhere people respect you." Malik blinked, unsure what to say. People didn't talk to him like that. People didn't talk about him like that. Nathan stood and extended a hand. "Come with me. You're not going back to this." Malik stared at the hand for a long moment, then slowly reached up and took it. In the weeks that followed, the city's attention shifted as it always did. But inside the Carril home, life was different. Ava's laughter returned in bursts, and she no longer startled when a door opened. Malik had a room of his own for the first time in years. A clean bed, fresh clothes, shoes that didn't leak when it rained. He was enrolled in school again, his name on the roster like any other students. One Saturday morning, Ava sat at the breakfast table in her favorite seat, reaching for the orange juice. She spilled a little, as she always did, but didn't stop trying to pour. Malik sat across from her, smiling as he buttered a piece of toast. When she caught the sound of his laugh, she grinned in his direction. "You're my big brother now," she said simply. The words hit him harder than he expected. They weren't related by blood, but they were bound by something just as strong, the night he'd refused to let her be alone in the dark. For the first time in his life, Malik felt what it was like to belong somewhere without having to earn it every day. He knew the streets were still out there, full of people who would walk past a child in need without stopping. But now he also knew this. Sometimes the smallest act, carrying someone through the rain, could change everything. And maybe, just maybe, the world didn't have to be as cold as it had been for him. And if I'm honest, that's the part that stays with me. Not the mansion, not the viral video, not the reward money people online kept talking about. It's that a boy who thought he was invisible found out he wasn't. And in the eyes of a little girl who couldn't see him at all, he became impossible to forget.